was the first year that we started the Asbury Angel Project. The Asbury Angel Project was something that we all felt was necessary to preserve our history and to preserve the memory of those people who were integral in making a music scene exist here in Asbury Park. Starting with the first superstar from Asbury Park, trombonist Arthur Pryor. We inducted our first 11 inductees last year. This is our second year, and we have 10 very, very wonderful people, very talented people, very integral people in the making of our scene. Everybody's here. Steve Schrager, Eileen Chapman, Jackie Pappas, and Matt. First of all, before I start, I'd like to thank Kay Harris, one of our board members on the Asbury Angel Project, Charlie and Pam Horter, Don Stein and the Asbury Park Historical Society, one of our Blue Ribbon panel members, the writer, the historian, just a tremendous music, fountain of musical knowledge and expertise, Bob Santelli. One of our main sponsors, the Asbury Park Press. The City of Asbury Park, Madison Marquette, who keeps places like the Stone Pony open and the Boardwalk going. And of course, Syracuse Signs, who created the plaques that we installed on the boardwalk benches last summer, that they very wisely took off the benches before Superstorm Sandy.
Good thinking.
So this year we have 10 inductees. Our first inductee is Madam Era Tanoli, 1919 to 2011. Era Tanoli was the founder and the motivating force behind the Metro Lyric Opera Company, which presented more than 50 years of summer opera festivals at the Paramount Theater here in Asbury Park. She was an accomplished performer. Madame Tanoli had her own radio show at 16. She earned a master's in voice from La Scala, Italy's famous opera house. She performed there at the Arena di Verona in part of the Leo and Puccini's Turandot with Maria Callas in the title role. In the U.S., Madame Tanoli performed in numerous roles at the Metropolitan and other theaters before settling here in Allenhurst. In addition to founding the Metro Lyric Opera, she was a beloved teacher to many, many students who went on to perform at opera houses throughout the world. Madame Era Tanoli. Our second inductee is Leo Karp. He was a bar owner, an irascible guy, known as a very tough businessman and competitor. Leo Karp owned the Turf Club, which was one of the premier musical establishments on Asbury Park's west side. The club, located at Springwood and Union Avenues, Karp booked rhythm and blues acts and performers including a very young Clarence Clemens. Musicians from the city's east side hotels would migrate across the tracks after the hotel bars closed at midnight and would come to jam. The Turf Club and Big Bill's were perhaps the leading clubs on a very swinging west side of Asbury Park. Leo Karp. Our third inductee, Bobby Williams.
Bobby.
He was also known, and mostly known, as Big Bad Bobby Williams. He was a drummer, and he was a regular at the Upstage, where he basically served as the house drummer. He was a member of Springsteen's Dr. Zoom and the Sonic Boom Band, and Williams also played with Southside Johnny Lyons, Little Stephen Van Zandt, and Gary Talent, and the short-lived Funky Dusty and the Soul Broom Band before forming his own band, the Big Bad Bobby Williams Band, in the late 1970s. He was immortalized in Springsteen's liner notes for the first Southside Johnny and the Asbury Jutes album, I Don't Want to Go Home. Bruce said of him, he was the heaviest drummer of them all, in terms of both poundage and sheer sonic impact. Big Bad Bobby Williams, badass King of Hearts, as tough as he'd go to the limit for you every time, all night long. Big Bad Bobby Williams. This, I think, is our first journalist to be inducted into the Asbury Angel Project. Journalist Chris Barry. Chris Barry came up through the alternative music ranks in the late 1970s, and his writing became a staple in the publications such as the Aquarian Weekly, the Asbury Park Press, Pipeline Magazine, East Coast Rocker, Relics, Shorelines, and many others. Chris was the first to submit alternative and punk rock to the Stone Pony right here, and he introduced music lovers to various bands such as In Between Dreams, the Catholic Girls, the Antoinettes, Rogue, Nude Swirl, the Mad Daddies, and the Whirling Dervishes, who are playing tonight. Chris also logged time as a promoter for the Fast Lane right here in Asbury Park, and promoted the early days of the Brighton Bar in Long Branch, presenting shows by nationally known artists such as David Peel, Gigi Allen, New York Dolls legend Johnny Thunders, and Alan Mann. Ladies and gentlemen, Chris Barry. Kevin! George Ioka. Yeah, come on, George Ioka, man. If it wasn't for George Ioka, you couldn't fucking hear me tonight. Because see these cabinets? Those are George Ioka's cabinets. George served in the U.S. Navy during Vietnam and received high-level sonar training before returning home to combine his knowledge of sound with a love of music to form Dynacoustics, which provided sound systems for local venues as well as local and national touring acts. His sound systems were installed in venues like the Brighton Bar, the Tradewinds, Stone Pony, the Birch Hill, the Headliner, and Starland Ballroom, just to name a few. Ioka provided sound reinforcement for all of the legendary shore bands, as well as national acts ranging from Bon Jovi to Kiss to Tony Bennett. He also played guitar, which I didn't know till right before he died. He was in a band called Thunder Chicken, which I thought was the most ridiculous name I'd ever heard in my life. But they actually got signed. In the 70s, anything could happen. He also played in a band called Wham, which had nothing to do with George Michael's. Ladies and gentlemen, because our ears needed him, George Ioka lived a great life. Jervis Gus Tillman. Gus Tillman was a very talented songwriter who founded one of the few record labels of the late 1950s and 60s from the Asbury Park area. His Vibro record label was the first local record label to concentrate on recording West Side artists. Formed in 1958, Gus Tillman later moved the Vibro label to Belmar, but he continued recording singers from the Asbury Park's West Side. Some of the West Side artists that Gus recorded were the Ray Dots, the V8s, Mike Robinson, Delmar Gogans, Bobby Thomas, Roosevelt McDuff, and Tony Maples. A great part of the Asbury Park musical legacy. Please put your hands together for Gus Tillman. Our next inductee, Daddy Gallagher. Daddy Gallagher, come on. A troubadour in the real sense of the word, Big Daddy Gallagher was a gentle giant, an imposing presence at 6 feet 6 inches tall, more than 400 pounds of musical might. With his flowing red hair and beard, he was a staple of the Jersey Shore music scene for decades. Danny fronted bands like Big Danny and the Boppers and the Lost Leader Band. A bouncer at the legendary Upstage Club on Cookman Avenue, Big Danny served briefly as a roadie for Bruce Springsteen, who lived with him for a while in Asbury Park in the early 1970s. Big Danny was a member of Springsteen's short-lived band, Dr. Zoom and the Sonic Boom. It was almost like everybody was a member of that band. And as a matter of fact, everybody who was in the music scene at that time was a member of that band. But Danny was the guy who played Monopoly on the side of the stage while the band played. Although years later, Danny told everybody they weren't really playing Monopoly. They were actually shooting craps. Ladies and gentlemen, Big Daddy Gallagher. Dr. Philip Pattillo. A very, very special man. A jack of all trades and a true Renaissance man, Phil Pattillo, who earned a doctorate in engineering technology from LaSalle University, was a master luthier, an inventor, an engineer, an electronics consultant, and a draftsman. Pattillo began repairing musical instruments at the age of 14 and soon developed what would become a lifelong passion for making, designing, and constructing superior quality guitars. Musical luminaries such as the great jazz guitarist Tal Farlow, the Beatles' Paul McCartney, the Rolling Stones' Keith Richards, Elvis Presley, Jim Croce, Johnny Cash. These were just a few of Pattillo's many clients. Around 1970, Pattillo sold a young Bruce Springsteen a 1953 Fender Esquire that would become famous. Springsteen can be seen holding the guitar on the cover of his album Born to Run. When Phil died in 2010, he held over 30 U.S. patents in the medical, the musical, and alternative energy fields. A true Renaissance man, ladies and gentlemen, Phil Pattillo.